Welcome to Let's Talk Transportation, a podcast series of the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as the MPO. We talk about the ins and outs of transportation in Broward County and all of Southeast Florida, why it matters, how it works, and the challenges and opportunities related to achieving great transportation. I'm your host, Greg Stewart, Executive Director of the MPO, and I'm joined by
Alan Hooper.
And Hooper Construction?
Yeah, you could say Hooper Construction or Urban Street Development, but I am a native of Fort Lauderdale, and I've lived here all my life, and I love Broward County and Fort Lauderdale.
And that's actually kind of the kickoff, because really when we talk about, I had the great opportunity to grow up here too. And this place has changed so much in our lifetime.
Yes.
And, but as a change agent, I look at you and some of the things that you've done. Well, let's talk about childhood first.
Okay.
You had a chance to grow up in which neighborhood? Did you go to school?
Wow. So I live on the same street that I was born on. I live about 7 houses down from the house I grew up in. And
that happened by accident, or did you want that to happen?
I was living in Rio Vista, in a small house, and we had developed Avenue Lofts in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And my wife and I moved into one of the lofts just to live kind of that,
get the experience,
that city living type thing in a loft, which was really cool. But then we had a kid, and we're like, where are we going to go? And I hadn't been down my old street in 15 years, cruising down. And I said, honey, that is the house. If one was for sale, that's the one we would buy. And not 2 weeks later, a friend called and said, hey, that house is for sale. And we moved into that house. So,
that's cool.
And it brought me back, It made me feel comfortable.
So, raising a kid in the community, which is really difficult. Mm-hmm. I mean, back when we were younger, I remember we'd go out for bike rides and,
freedom.
Completely.
Yes.
Do you think that your child has had that same type of opportunity?
No. We've even watched a little bit closer than my parents. My parents didn't even watch me. Once, if we weren't in school, if the school was out, or if there wasn't something the family had to do, you were free to go and do whatever you wanted, by foot, by bike, however you wanted to get around.
I remember the rule for us was, as soon as the streetlights go on, you need to come home.
Yeah.
And, the summertime, the streetlights don't go on until after 8.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had that same type of childhood.
Exactly the same childhood.
And when you think about it, it was just like the type of city that Fort Lauderdale was. Los Olos was there, but it was really just a seasonal street. Yeah. So, what do you think happened, to make the dynamic change, that jump that's occurred?
I think the first thing that happened was Los Olos Boulevard allowed street parking and cafe dining. Okay. And that started, at least in that one quadrant, I think that started bringing a little more interest to street living, right? And a little bit more interesting street than just antiques and bridal gowns.
Bridal gowns, exactly.
And clothing. The beach was always fun. It just went through cycles of different types of fun, right? It went from spring break to get rid of spring break, and it became pretty benign for a while there because there were no new hotels,
right.
And you had just basically killed the only thing that was making it work at the time.
I remember the type of job I have, getting to do complete streets and projects like that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite presentations I've ever done, and it was in Panama City, Florida.
Wow.
And I used the picture of spring break. Right. Before, when I used to be 4 lanes and the on-street parking at an angle, and then I'm thinking, this is one of the first complete streets projects in South Florida, and it was like nice sidewalks, right, and the wave wall and all that, and I said we were successful at relocating spring break to Panama City.
Yes.
And all of the folks up there were like, oh,
Yeah, you're the ones.
Yeah, you're the one that did this to us.
Trying to get rid of it now.
They are.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's really kind of funny, but it's just like, that was a transportation project.
Yes.
It really actually was.
Pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, even with Solis, with the on-street parking, it became a transportation thing.
Yeah.
It's like, so, you know, given your development side of things,
Okay.
when you're looking at stuff, are you thinking of the streets and what it would feel like? And,
I mean, so the first thing I ever did right out of college, well, I started in fixing up little houses, and I thought Rio Vista and Victoria Park were such cool little areas. And coming from Tallahassee, from FSU, you know, there were those types of houses there too.
right.
And so I wanted to do that. But when I first got into the commercial side of it, that Himmarshee district to me had a Main Street type feel to it. The Broward Center had just been built. The Riverwalk, which was, you know, you talk about complete streets. Well, it's kind of an accessory or a complement to that complete street. And it brought some real interest to the area. And so that's where we went first. We started looking at doing something on a street that looked like it could be pedestrian at moments in time, which it ended up being. And the first thing we built there was the Himmarshee Bar and Grill. And it had a mezzanine, and I did it after Clyde's and Costello's in Tallahassee.
Did you? Because it always felt really like it's familiar to me.
Yes.
But I couldn't put my finger on it.
Right. And you can look down.
Yeah.
And Tim Petrillo and Peter Balukas and I, that was when we first started working together. And that was the beginning of what's now the Restaurant People.
Right. Okay. So that started. And then you did Tarpon Bend too? Is that?
And then the next thing was Tarpon Bend.
Because that had the second floor too, the mezzanine.
And still at this point, this is 1997, no high rises were going vertical.
Right.
The only residential high rise, I think, was the River House.
Okay.
Right? Something like that. There wasn't a lot of vertical construction happening. There were some mid rises, but not much.
I returned to Fort Lauderdale in 2000, and because Himmarshee was there.
Yes.
We used to go to it. In fact, I used to go there on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
Because that was actually, it was fun. Yeah. But I was up in West Palm Beach at the time. I was working up there, and we were busy doing like the City Place project and all that. And then you guys had the riverfront that was activated.
Had been built before Tarpon Bend.
Yep.
And we tried to get them to merge a kind of an entertainment district with us, and they didn't want to have anything to do with us. And so we kind of did it on our own. And the whole purpose of that, you know, it's like everything. You should be doing things, in my opinion, in the development business that is bringing something to the table for the community. And at the moment in time, we were like, you know, as young people, we had nowhere to go. You were spread out all over the place. If you wanted to go have fun at night, it was Boca, over near the beach, or you went to South Beach, or you went to Palm Beach. And so spread out. So we wanted to create a little neighborhood that our friends and I could hang out in. And that's what we did. And so that's the motivator, was to place make before ULI was really telling you to place make. Right.
Well, and that usually those are the fun moments. When I was up in West Palm Beach, Mayor Nancy Graham, she became the strong mayor. I worked for her, and she used to go to the gym, the ultimate gym that was on Dave Frisbee. I don't know if you ever met it. On Clematis, exactly. Yes. And that was Clematis was starting to become something.
Yes.
And I gave her a ULI magazine, ironically, to read on the treadmill. And that was what gave birth to City Place.
Man.
Because she wanted to put a target where City Place is now.
Really?
Yeah, that was her original idea. But, that's how you lean into people's ears, like, that you were doing too, because that changed the dynamic of the positioning of Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
The stuff that you and your partners ended up moving forward with had that really lighting a fire on what became a pretty neat city.
Right.
So what brought you into doing, you started, I guess, commercial, then you started residential after that?
So at the moment I was single, and I was traveling to New York a lot and going to parties in New York. I had a friend who had a sister that worked in New York City, and we would go to these parties in lofts.
Okay.
I was like, wow, these are cool, man. And it was at a time when people had lofts and they were just renting them. They weren't worth anything back then. There were these big empty apartments that looked industrial. And I thought, man, this would work in Fort Lauderdale big time. And so Peter Feldman, who's now passed, he kept trying to coax me into coming into what at the time was called Flagler Heights,
right,
and to develop something. And there was a 2-acre parcel been for sale for like 15 years. And this old guy held paper on it until I could get approvals. And I built the first lofts in Fort Lauderdale. It was the Avenue Lofts.
Right.
And they sold, like, all I did was, because it was just when the www.coms had come out,
right,
I put a sign, www.avenuelofts.com in black. And that's all I put out on that property. And I sold all the units that way with a website.
That's great.
And people just wanted to live in a loft in Fort Lauderdale. And that kind of kick-started what happened in Flagler Village. We even renamed the area. Peter, myself, Charlie Ladd, Doug McCraw, the Mastrianas, we all got together and said, we got to change the name of this place. It sounds like a retirement area. And instead we wanted it to sound young and youthful, and Flagler Village just fit better.
So, your project came in, Peter Feldman started building in there too, a lot of land acquisition, single owner properties that had to be put together. I mean, were you involved with some of those assemblies? And I mean, can you share with the people who are going to be listening to this in the future, the efforts you needed to put in to create the place that they probably live today?
Oh, well, I mean, you had to go through a couple of years of entitlements. I had to work with no one wanted to finance lofts in a neighborhood that was all warehouses and blighted. It does not look the way it did back then. And so the CRA, which is the Community Redevelopment Agency with Kim Jackson, that made a huge difference. They came to the table with what's called tax increment financing. And once we were finished with the project, we collected these checks that kind of made the investment margin work.
Okay.
So I could get my investors, and then the bank felt like that everything was, that we had the support of the community to do it. It kind of helped us get the financing, and it kick-started it. So that was fairly important. On the assembly side, I mean, like the one we're doing now, which is called Fat Village, that took me like 4 years to assemble a city block, and then to work with Doug McCraw to merge 2 city blocks together. That literally, we've been working on that. We're just starting construction. It's 2024, and we started working on that in 2016.
But that gives the listener an idea of the length of time. It doesn't happen overnight.
So it's, how I put it? It's like the trilogy of the Hobbits or the Star Wars. It takes not one movie. It takes by the time someone's won 3 Academy Awards, you're still working on a development project. And you look up at these people and they say, oh, I want to thank everybody and the director. It's been a hard year and a half. And I'm like, a year and a half? I'm into this for a decade. Are you kidding me? So it never goes as quickly as you think it will. And when you're changing a city, it's the same with the entire development of the city. That's the way it is.
Where do you see it changing now? We're sitting in 2024, just beginning, and you have that. The Avenue Lofts are there. The Flagler Village community is really congealing really nicely. Yeah. Both sides of Federal Highway are becoming really nice. Yes. Really nice.
Really nice.
And then actually befitting of the boulevard it deserves to be. And then you look at like Los Olas. Just the other day I went in, and I'm planning on retiring. I was thinking, well, maybe I move into an apartment. The only for sale product on Los Olas right now starts at almost $2 million for a 1-bedroom.
Yes.
Just kind of keep that an idea for those in the future.
Yes.
But, I was just like, okay, well, I can't do that. I probably couldn't and not eat dinner, but that's a different story. Right. So then the reality is, where do you see it going from where we are today in this incredibly dynamic place to how do you see it in the next 40 years when you're ready to kind of stop doing this?
I think the verticality is going to continue towards the airport. I think it's going to go into the Northwest neighborhood. I think it'll everything in between is going to get filled up from Federal to the railroad tracks, and everything from the airport all the way to Sunrise Boulevard, and then other areas too. And I just think what's going to be important now that I'm sitting in an office that cares about this, what's going to be important is the connectivity and being able to give people a conveyor belt to get from place to place.
I asked that of a couple of folks that, sit in Fort Lauderdale about, is sidewalks important? What is it what do you start with? Because it's very disconnected right now, as far as, just looking at it, how you get from your development over to some of Peter Feldman's stuff, over to what Charlie Ladd's put in, and then how do you get around?
So the biggest mistake that was made in Flagler Village, in my opinion, to this day, Andrews and 3rd Avenue still don't have brand new sidewalks, brand new street trees, the widths that are required, and it takes away from the connectivity, and people will get in their cars and they'll drive. And now it's about to change because some of those big pieces on Andrews have been taken.
Right.
And apparently a deal is going to happen on the one-stop shop one day.
Yeah.
And the city hall will redevelop.
Oh, yeah.
So there's going to be a nice boulevard with new sidewalks and new trees, but I think that is the most important thing. If you go to Tallahassee, where we built College Town, the CRA came in and did Gaines Street all the way from Monroe to the stadium, and that whole area has redeveloped so quickly. I really believe that dolling up, even if you mess them up block by block as you redevelop with a building and fix it again, if you set the tone as a city, you have one-upped any of the cities that don't do that.
So to share with the listeners, Gaines Street in Tallahassee used to be a 4-lane road, narrow road, but still 4 lanes. Warehousing, railroad, really not the nicest place.
No.
The city came in, did a road diet.
Yes.
Actually, came down to 2 lanes, did a couple of traffic circles, did some things that are basically very unorthodox, even here.
Yes. They even have back-in angled parking.
Exactly. They were willing to challenge the conventional.
Right.
And, that clearly that became Urban Outfitters is there.
Yes.
You actually created something in Tallahassee that was unique. How do we help the folks in Fort Lauderdale get to, make that important to them, that type of style? How do, you talk about, both Andrews and 3rd as being a corridor. How do we encourage that type of behavior, not only just on those corridors, but on the side streets?
I tell you what, that's
the $32,000 question.
Ask the leaders because if you think about it, the political leaders all want to say, we live in a world-class city or a world-class county, right?
Yeah.
Go to Brickell.
Yeah.
Go to Brickell today. And this is the timeline hasn't been any longer or shorter. If you remember, there was a place called Tobacco Road, which I think the building still exists there, but it was the only building in the area. It's all warehouses. And people would only go there to go listen to blues music and live music, okay? But there was not one vertical building there, okay? And now, I was there for New Year's Eve. People are walking all over the place all hours of the night because the sidewalks are nice, the street trees are nice, and now the buildings are coming in and they're nice. And nobody's giving them a hard time whether they're too tall, because they'll build them on a postage stamp, go super tall, but they'll be thin and slender. Yeah. And I just think that you could learn a lot from how you treat your streets. And like the city of Fort Lauderdale, if we would just go in and start doing the side streets, Andrews, 3rd, you don't even have to change the direction in which they run.
No, I agree with you.
Just make the parallel, make it all right. Make it all right.
So, one of the things, that's one of the conversations I had with Mayor Trentalis is at this day and age is actually the mayor of Fort Lauderdale. So, that was like, well, what do we do with the sidewalks? And, how do we do that? And it's like, well, we have to become this world-class city. And it was a really interesting conversation, but it never really got to how do you do that? And now having you here really, and that's where one of the reasons why you're getting that visionary award, it's because you kind of see it. You know what it takes.
Right.
And in your mind's eye, because you've been elsewhere, you understand on not just the development side and what the profit and loss margins are going to be, but also what it does to a community and how it builds it back into that place that we all think Fort Lauderdale should become.
Right.
And so with that type of conversation, that next generation, let's say we kind of get in and, that's what the penny sales tax was all about, moving into that next generation of transportation, that the whole idea of rebuilding downtown Fort Lauderdale should probably be primary. That's the heart of the community. Right. So you start from your heart and you work your way out to, to actually do things. Yeah. So, I know that I've been having conversations with Corey Largren, who's currently running Broward County Transit, and Monica Sapiro, and we talk about how it's important to leave the community better than we found it. Right. And, there's conversations about bringing back light rail, having a light rail system come into downtown. How does that work? How does that circulate? How does that come from 17th Street into downtown Fort Lauderdale and then go west out to the shopping areas or out to the university? Right. And so, what do you see? Is that like in your mind, is that the right path to be on?
I think if it can be as modern as possible, I think a streetcar is definitely something that adds the amenity. You got to remember, there's really only two people that are going to ride these things: tourists and people that have to ride them. Mm-hmm. Okay, the affluent will only do them if they feel like they're getting an elevated experience and they're taking a bunch of time off their day, like a Brightline type move from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. But tourists love it, so it increases the perception of your community when you put things like that in, and then the residents feel like you're treating them well because you've given them an elevated experience on how to get to work or get to anchors in their community. They want to, like a Sawgrass Mall or something like that.
So that was a conversation with Corey too, because we didn't talk about just providing a transit, but what the entire experience would be like, and a high quality experience. We actually did discuss the whole thing with Brightline and how can you extrapolate that out to your public transit service. Right. Because, everyone deserves that chance to feel good about themselves. Right. Even they may not be millionaires, but they should feel like they are. Right. And so, that whole idea of the transit experience, I think, is so important as we move forward. As we sit there and realize we're kind of coming towards the close of this, what ideas and concepts do you want to bring forward, or would you like to talk about? And then when we get back together again, which we will, let's kind of do a measurement and say, these things are happening, these things aren't happening. Because I didn't talk to you about the penny sales tax or anything like that. Yeah.
I don't. I think the penny sales tax is something that'll give us the funding for opportunities, right? Whatever those may be, but. I don't know if this is real, but I saw it on the internet, and I know you probably get people say, "Oh, I just saw this on the internet. It's a total fake," But you know how the Tesla follows the lines when it's doing the anonymous vehicle? Why can't a streetcar not be on rails? Why can't a streetcar follow the lines? I thought I saw one on the internet, and it looked sleek, and it was moving along, and it was using all the technology that we're going to be using with the new programs that the surtax is bringing forward, with changing the light to green when it approaches, and letting cars kind of play within the same field as the streetcar, but you take the whole track thing out, and then no one can complain about the catenary lines, because it's always something that folks want to kill an idea with. I think this is a really cool way to do it.
I saw it physically in China. I will tell you.
You saw it physically?
Physically, I actually had a chance. BYD, a company in China, they build electric vehicles. They actually build mass transit. They have a monorail system. They have all these other things. Well, one of the things, that slow us down is this permitting and NEPA, environmental requirements. But that said, I actually saw one in operation, and it does follow just a white line, painted white line, and it's just quite
what all
simple.
Our cars do when they vibrate and you're like going out of the line. It's telling you you're going out of the line. How easy is it to do that?
And it really is an efficient way of dealing with the infrastructure, especially down here, given the flooding and street problems that we do have. So, when that's happening, I can't follow a guide, then if the system needs to shut down, it doesn't just keep going.
Right.
Unlike a subway or a train, it's just like the tracks are there, so you just can keep going and get.
This is flexible.
Yes, exactly.
Right. If you have to move it over a street, or if you have to make an earlier turn,
you can.
And what if there's a wreck somewhere and you can go around it? Maybe you have some detour lines that allow you to do it.
One of the things we're working on here is going to be our artificial intelligence program that we've been working on. We created an entire digital twin of all of South Florida, not just of Broward County. And it can actually run scenarios within seconds that used to take, weeks and months. And literally, if you have a traffic accident or a train slows down, you can actually control all the traffic lights to allow for the flow of traffic. I'm really excited to be introducing
that's going to be important when the commuter rail does happen, right? Because you're going to have to figure out how to keep things flowing.
One of the things we've been working with traffic ops and Mark Plass, who I don't know if you got to meet him in the hall.
Yes.
They were dancing. Basically, we're going to be able to say, okay, you got north-south trains moving at this speed. This is where the next intersection where the crossings are, and then delay the lights 3 or 4 blocks back.
Yes.
So you're not all crunched up at the, and that we're going to probably get about 20% more out of our roadways. And then you're going to also see, coming out of this office anyway, where we're going to either underground go under or over the tracks and allow for traffic to flow better.
Right.
And that whole idea of having the rail, the light rail system, not necessarily with the Cantonary, is very possible and doable. Even it can even charge at each stop, each station. So, basically when the vehicle stopped, basically these 2 poles would go into the vehicle, charge it, and then drop back down on the ground. So this is a great time for somebody with your brain to be in the seats where you are to help guide, because there's lots of ideas and it's going to be, okay, now pick them. Right. Find the one that you think is going to work the best. Right. Because we're not going to sit with the traditional ways of doing things. Right. We really aren't.
And technology is moving so fast that it's going to open up new opportunities all the time.
It's a very exciting time. And that, my friend, we're going to have you back on the next time, and look forward to, providing you the honorary of, the visionary, because that's all part of the future.
Thanks. And thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, and it's always good to sit at a table with you, Greg.
The Let's Talk Transportation podcast is produced by the Broward MPO, where every day we fund and implement projects that move people and goods, create jobs, and strengthen communities. Learn more at browardmpo.org and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Speak Up Broward. If there is a transportation topic you'd like to know more about, let us know by sending an email to info@browardmpo.org. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by MPO employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the view of the MPO or any of its officials. For complaints, questions, or concerns about civil rights or non-discrimination, or for special requests under the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact Carl Ema, Title VI Coordinator, at 954-876-0052 or EMAC at browardmpo.org.